video games can peak and then fall off all in the matter of a couple weeks, which unfortunately is a common theme within the gaming industry. But in today's video, we'll talk about a game that not only fell off after a couple weeks, but was also evaluated at over $1.5 billion. Today, the game struggles to retain more than 400 active players, and despite receiving over $100 million in investment rounds, it has failed to garner any type of momentum since its release. It saw us from the viral kingdom, and I'll be covering the story of how Splitgate fumbled one of the largest bags in gaming history. Before we get into where everything went wrong, we first need to understand the history of Splitgate. The idea for the game started all the way back in 2014, where co-founder Ian Prue, aka Cardinal Soldier, was inspired after playing Portal 2. Portal 2 was a critically acclaimed puzzle platform video game developed by Valve, released in 2011. The game introduced several new gameplay mechanics, including laser redirection, light bridges, and gels that increase speed or allow players to jump higher, which significantly expand the complexity and variety of these puzzles. Portal 2 also utilized portal mechanics that allowed players to traverse and manipulate their environments in unique ways, allowing you to literally travel through portals. After playing Portal 2, he had the idea to combine portals with that of a more traditional FPS shooter like Halo or Call of Duty. At this point in his life though, Ian had no formal game development experience. However, he was studying computer science at Stanford at the time, and he would use his class in senior year to develop the early stages of what would later be known as Splitgate. Ian used two different laptops to test out his game, literally playing against himself. The tests went well, but it's pretty difficult to tell if a game is actually fun until you're playing it in a real environment. So Ian invited a couple of his friends over to run a mini LAN, playing his school project's game, which at the time didn't even have a name. The LAN was supposed to run for 45 minutes, but they ended up playing for over 5 hours.
But I convinced them, 45 minutes, that's it, just come test it for me. And we ended up playing for 5 hours straight that day.
It's a good sign.
And that was kind of, the turning point and the kind of first aha moment for me of like, wow, this thing is really, really addicting. And it's fundamentally different than anything I've ever played. And what was so cool in particular about this, during this 5-hour session, the game kind of changed as we figured out different things. But when we were playing this as a group for the first time with one gun and garbage mechanics and terrible performance and whatever, we're still learning. The map is not designed in a particularly good way, right? But we're still figuring out. And it kind of starts off as this just shoot 'em up game where you kind of get from point A to point B, and then you start experimenting. And by the end of that 5 hours, we were doing things that we had no clue were even possible.
Despite the game being incredibly fun, Ian had a massive internship with Apple following his graduation and was left with the difficult choice of not pursuing to build the game and instead taking an internship with the monopoly company Apple. It wouldn't be until much later, after Ian had finished his Apple internship as well as halfway through his master's degree, that he decided he would found 1047 Studios along with co-founder and friend Nick. Coming up with the name of the studio was pretty easy, as it came from the dorm room address which Nick and Ian shared a couple years prior. However, convincing their parents to work on Splitgate was a much more difficult task. Because of their degrees from the prestigious school of Stanford, along with high-quality internship experience, both Ian and Nick had massive job opportunities working for large companies, but turned them down to take a risk on developing this brand new game. Between the two friends, they were spending almost 60 hours a week working on the game, and that's not accounting for the schoolwork they were completing in the meantime. It basically consumed their entire lives while in school, and this grind only continued after they graduated, as they opted to continue working on the game instead of looking for a 9-to-5 job. They were the only ones behind the game's development until they eventually decided to hire a level designer and animator funded with their own money. After working on the game relentlessly for about a year, 1047 Studios, which is now known as 1047 Games, was able to get some funding from large investors, which allowed them to build a small but sturdy team of around 25 employees, mostly consisting of developers. This brings us to the day of release, where Splitgate, initially named Splitgate Arena Warfare, was launched on May 24th of 2019 for PC players only. Despite minimal marketing, the game generated considerable buzz through word of mouth, primarily fueled by content creators and the gaming community on social media. At its peak, it attracted about 11,000 concurrent players, which is a really solid release, considering they decided to use very little of their company's budget on marketing. This choice to basically ignore traditional marketing for the game was an odd one, but it would be something they would make sure to fix moving forward. At launch, the game featured 3 modes: ranked, social, and customs, providing good variety for the different styles of play. Although it did face criticism for its optimization and the Halo 2 inspired 1 to 50 ranking system. Unfortunately for Splitgate, it fell off dramatically after its opening month, losing over 60% of its average player count, but things just got worse, as the next month was even more dramatic, seeing a loss of 96.69% of their first month's players. The game went from alive to almost dead in under 2 months, but this wouldn't be the last of Splitgate, as the developers were hard at work to revive this game with tons of quality updates, starting with Season 1. The first significant update for Splitgate arrived on September 4th of 2019. This update introduced a redesigned rank system based on ELO, daily and weekly challenges, XP earnings and custom games, and new cosmetics. Additional enhancements included a new map, performance upgrades, and an overhauled user interface. Although these changes were positively received, they failed to significantly boost the player base, with peak numbers barely reaching 480 players for the month, which was a slight increase compared to Season 0. When Season 2 launched, things looked even more bleak in terms of player count, as the average daily players were in the very low hundreds. This update brought new content, including the Oasis map and the carbine weapon. Loot boxes were removed altogether, replaced by a new arena pass system, which followed the more industry standard battle pass that was popularized by Fortnite. Despite these updates to the game, the anticipated console release was delayed, leaving the community eager but unfulfilled. Season 2's adjustments showed promise, but they were insufficient in reviving the game whatsoever. With Season 3 releasing, many fans believed crossplay was going to come out, but unfortunately, it didn't. A console release and crossplay was something that had been hinted at by the Splitgate team, but was never officially announced, and it was a very big deal to the small but loyal Splitgate community. This is because they were patiently waiting for Splitgate's big revival moment, and if there was ever an update to do it, it would be the console update. This is because most FPS games are massive on console, and a game like Splitgate would be the perfect console shooter. There's a reason games like Call of Duty and Halo are so popular on consoles, and this is because of the fluid movements involved in these games that make playing on a controller much more optimal. With Splitgate having similar movement to these games, it was almost a guarantee that Splitgate would perform well with the console market, and getting this game to PlayStations and Xboxes could be the little push Splitgate needed to be considered an S-tier shooter. Unfortunately for the fans of the game, the console release wouldn't happen until after Season 3. On June 1st of 2021, 1047 Games released a teaser trailer that was brief yet captivating, lasting just 25 seconds long and intriguingly titled Splitgate Teaser Trailer Summer 2021. The surprising nature of the teaser set the small Splitgate community abuzz with speculation, primarily about a potential console release. The wait for confirmation wasn't long, as on June 12th, a new trailer was unveiled, proclaiming that Splitgate was set to launch on Xbox, PlayStation, and PC with crossplay functionality on July 27th, 2021. This announcement also marked the rebranding from Splitgate Arena Warfare to a much simpler Splitgate. This announcement alone revitalized the player base, resulting in a 133% surge on Steam and players, nearly elevating the peak concurrent player base to 1,000. July started on a high note with 1047 Games announcing a pre-beta demo running from July 1st to the 6th.
That was sick, actually.
The gunplay is really satisfying.
This shit looks lit.
It's important to note that the Splitgate game was never officially released and was technically still in beta up to this point. The open beta period marked a significant uptick in engagement as console players joined the fray and PC veterans either returned or discovered Splitgate for the first time. The crossplay feature allowed for a more inclusive matchmaking experience, albeit the server infrastructure was strained under the sudden increase in demand. Within a single week, a game that had seen a maximum of 1,000 players spiked to an unprecedented 65,000 players, which would be a peak the Splitgate community would unfortunately never see again. As server issues began to surface, 1047 Games maintained transparency with the community. In a candid Reddit post dated July 22nd, "Hey guys, we are really sorry about the repeated server issues. I know how frustrating it is. Trust me, we are frustrated too. We are doing everything we possibly can to stay on top of things, and the 4 of us are sleeping about 2 to 3 hours per night. Right now, it's literally a race against time as we try to put out updates, as we struggle to keep up with the increase in players. Full transparency, we just hit 65,000 concurrent, which we are really proud of. But going from 55,000 to 65,000 in 24 hours is not an easy task, and going from 1,000 to 65,000 in a week is barely humanly possible. We wish we could just throw money at the problem and buy more servers, but there are a lot of moving parts, and scaling is an incredibly complicated issue that takes time. Rest assured though, we won't stop working on this until we are prepared for as much scale as possible, and we are doing everything we possibly can to make this smooth. Thankfully, this is what betas are for." As Splitgate entered a new era of popularity, it became evident that the game had recaptured the attention of the gaming community, drawing in an influx of players from both console and PC platforms. Despite server issues caused by the sudden surge in demand, the majority of the community showed understanding and patience. The beta version of the game surged in popularity, becoming one of the top played games on Steam and one of the most downloaded on PlayStation in August. The influx of players and enthusiasm breathed new life into the first-person shooter genre, which had been dominated by battle royales. Apart from the server issues, everything was going so well that 1047 Games decided to extend the open beta indefinitely, concluding the beta battle pass on August 24th. Although the full release was postponed, with over 10 million downloads since the open beta's inception, the hype was real and the anticipation was building for more news promised at Gamescom. With all these updates, as well as the very successful console launch with very limited marketing, Splitgate raised an impressive $100 million in funding on top of the initial $10 million and $6.5 million raised earlier in the year, leading to a total valuation of $1.5 billion. Let me repeat that again. During the peak of Splitgate's popularity, their developer studio, which only had one game released, which was Splitgate, was valued at $1.5 billion. This effectively means Splitgate was worth $1.5 billion alone. Sure, Splitgate amassed 13 million downloads, which is very impressive, but a $1.5 billion evaluation is absolutely absurd. And to think that the developers could have had the opportunity to sell off their entire company for $1 billion is absolutely mind-blowing. From a game initially started as a school project in a college dorm room to a $1 billion evaluation is quite the amazing feat. But many, including myself at the time, saw this evaluation as way too high. The reason the game was evaluated so high was based on multiple factors, but the biggest was the amount of funding the game raised, which was over $100 million. Raising this much money for a studio with only one game that had only been realistically successful for 2 months is unheard of, but it's because of the founder's background which most likely helped them secure this funding. Both Ian and Nick went to Stanford University, which is known to have an incredibly rich alumni, including the likes of Reese Witherspoon, the co-founder of Google, and hey, even Elon Musk, although he only went there for 2 days. My point is that there are a lot of connections within Stanford to secure seed funds with its proximity to Silicon Valley's investment community, which could easily open doors to venture capital firms and angel investors. The founders' association with Stanford likely gave them greater visibility and access to investment resources, as well as a platform to effectively communicate their vision and the business potential of Splitgate, which is how they were able to raise so much money, which in turn hiked the valuation of the company. Despite being evaluated at $1.5 billion, many believe 1047 Games simply wasn't worth that much, with this Reddit user at the time stating, "Not to be too much of a downer, it really is a fun game, but is it worth $100 million in investment? I'm not sure how much money one could wring out of it, especially since it's going to be competing for attention against Halo's free-to-play multiplayer in the very near future." Whether you agree with the amount raised or not, this investment from Lightspeed Venture Partners helped 1047 Games create a long-term strategy aiming to build a sustainable business rather than seeking short-term success. This period marked a transformative phase for 1047 Games, which had evolved from a small indie studio to a significant player in the FPS game development industry. So 1047 Studios continued to update Splitgate, and in late September, it received an update that introduced mantling, which was a massive feature that helped the movement mechanics within the game. The winter update also added a seasonal touch to the maps and brought special events and challenges, sustaining the game's vibrant and engaged player base. This update also featured a new battle pass and numerous quality of life improvements, but this wouldn't be the most exciting thing within 2022's pipeline, as 1047 Games announced the summer season for 2022, revealing an exciting esports venture with over $500,000 in prize money up for grabs. Major esports organizations like T1, Space Station Gaming, United, XSET, Luminosity Gaming, Moist Esports, Elevate, and Kansas City Pioneers were set to participate, bringing further legitimacy and excitement to the game's competitive scene. These teams' participation was complemented by in-game skins, marketing Splitgate as a potential S-tier esport. Everything was looking up for Splitgate, but unfortunately, the player counts were only looking down. Splitgate's struggle to retain a robust player count amidst an oversaturated market was one of the critical reasons for its lowering popularity. The gaming landscape is fiercely competitive, with a few dominant titles capturing the majority of players' attention and time. Games like Fortnite and Apex Legends, with their rapid content updates and large established player communities, continually set high expectations for engagement and innovation. Add in the fact that brand new FPS titles were constantly dropping, like The Finals and X-Defiant, there was a ton of quality games to compete against. Splitgate faced the monumental task of vying for attention against these giants, often falling short despite its unique portal mechanics and dedicated fanbase. To combat these lower player counts, Splitgate started adding AI within their game to fill lobbies. As there wasn't enough players to fill up servers and wait times for games became extraordinarily long, the addition of AI would seem like the proper fit. Unfortunately though, the introduction of bots into gameplay further complicated the situation. In theory, bots serve a practical purpose, filling matches to reduce wait times and ensuring full lobbies. However, in practice, they often diminish the competitive integrity of matches. Players seek the thrill and challenge of pitting their skills against other human players, with victory feeling less significant against programmed bots. For a game that built its reputation on innovative player versus player dynamics, the bot issue was particularly jarring, leading to an upset community. Splitgate was a competitive game in nature, and removing that competitive aspect with AI was a huge mistake. As the months went on, the player count continued to drop, but it wouldn't be until the developers officially announced they were stopping all development on Splitgate that most fans of the game lost all hope. Behind the scenes, 1047 Games made a strategic choice to focus on developing the sequel to Splitgate instead of updating the current game. This new venture was both ambitious, but also an opportunity to apply lessons learned and to build upon the foundations laid by Splitgate. However, this focus on a future project meant a diversion of resources from the current game. Announcements about the sequel and the shift in developmental efforts gave players the impression that Splitgate would no longer be the studio's priority, leading to uncertainty about the game's longevity and future content roadmap.
We've decided that in order to build the game fans deserve, we're ending feature development of Splitgate. Our focus now shifts to an entirely new shooter in the Splitgate universe that we can't wait to share with you.
With no more updates and the looming presence of a successor, players felt much less incentivized to invest their time and energy into Splitgate, which is why today the game struggles to reach more than 400 average players across Steam, when at one point in time Splitgate was valued at $1.5 billion.